Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And want to start this episode off by thanking our viewers and our worldwide scouting department. As often happens around the beginning of the IAFA period, we've been given some great feedback by our viewers from around the world on which directions we should consider going and perhaps not going with this new IAFA class. Always helpful to hear what you are thinking, and definitely helps us make better decisions with this Oakland squad as we try to defend a World Series championship here in 2037. The main focus of this episode is going to be that IAFA signing period. Got a ton of feedback from viewers, as I noted. One thing that was interesting, not a lot of excitement around the pitchers this year. We did talk about a strategy towards the end of the last episode where we might go for one big-time player and then layer in a few other guys. And certainly if we do that, the reliever, Blinky Berlanga, maybe someone that we could fit in. But nobody recommended the best starting pitcher out there, Arturo Sandoval. And those of you who have followed me over the years know that I love high ceiling, low floor, high school and IAFA pitchers. Dream of developing my own Doc Gooden for the Oakland A's organization. So far we've done somewhat better developing Brian Taylor's for the Oakland A's organization. But I am always tempted by young pitchers, and rumor mill Sandoval is the best pitcher in this year's class. If we do decide to go with a pitcher that is a high-priced pitcher, Sandoval will certainly be the guy. But no one in the worldwide scouting department recommended going in that direction. And there were a couple pretty significant themes. Coach 1549 liked Luis Arellano, liked the high adaptability and work ethic, pretty interesting defensive player, and a guy with a pretty interesting bat as well. There were two other lower-priced players who got some attention, specifically being called out, and then more just noted as guys who could potentially be good supplements in with a big-time player. Luis Covarrubias, Coach 1549 and Why Me 943 both thought that the excellent defensive catcher with a great personality and a bat that looks like it could be functional at the major league level with the demand of only $420,000 might be an interesting way to go. And the same scouts also liked Nelson Alalde, looking for a little bit more at $450,000. The third baseman looks like he could definitely hit some homers and draw a crazy amount of walks if all goes well. So Anvil Olalde and Luis Covarrubias, both popular selections, but there were two players who really stood out. Before we get into the two top-end players who stood out, Hold the Door thought that this might be a year to not go for one of the top-end players and just make a combination of lots of the cheap guys. So Olalde, a Covarrubias, maybe even throw a Jesus Berlanga in there. And then there's certainly plenty of other players looking for less than $1 million. So that was the plan from Hold Door, who always has an interesting perspective and makes us think about things in the scouting reports that Hodor files. But back to the two most popular players. Second in the voting from the worldwide scouting department was the young second baseman Jesus Esquivel, Dodo Dude, Jake Poston, Calvin Ha, even Bladestaff to some degree, were all intrigued by Esquivel. Everyone kind of noted the similarities in his potential profile with the very low current contact and avoid strikeout ratings to potentially becoming another Bobby Cabral or Byron Brain or Hidero Endo type. But with that world-class home run power and gap power and eye that could both be well above average, along with pretty decent speed, Esquivel was a strong second choice among those who turned in scouting reports from the worldwide scouting department. But even Esquivel, the support that he had paled in comparison to the shortstop David Palomares. Gorian Del Quimbo, a left-handed hitting shortstop, solid defensively. He's got the durability, decent speed, high adaptability and intelligence, and potential for his contact, gap power, home run power, and batting eye to all be well above averaged if he meets his true potential, or what we think his true potential is. And Palomares was supported by a wide swath of the worldwide scouting department. Alkshy, Avery Shaham, Bladestaff, Scott Donovan, Not My Four-Ply, YME943, Kyle Patrick, Paul West, Calvin Huh, Jarek Braxton, Kevin McDowell, DLL First Base 14, all among the scouts who favor going with Gorian Del Quimbo with our primary focus in this IAFA period. And we have gotten a little more creative and ambitious in some recent IAFA periods where we've tried to go for two players, and in some cases two relatively highly paid players right at the start. We've had good luck doing that, but some of you suggested if you go for Palomares, there's a fair amount of less expensive talent out there. Just make sure that you get Palomares signed, sealed, and delivered before you try to get too cute. My words, not the scouts' words. And I agree with that assessment, and ultimately I agree going with Palomares. We will certainly track Esquivel, and obviously there's no guarantee that we're going to get Palomares, so maybe we pivot to someone like Esquivel in the next week or two if things don't work out with David. I am also intrigued by Arturo Sandoval, and honestly, I don't disagree with the scouting report that Coach 1549 put on Luis Arellano. Gargo is also a very interesting player as well. But with the lowest asking price of any of the top guys that we've talked about, and the fact that in a perfect world we would like to supplement a couple of lower-priced players, we're going to go right after Palomares from the start, asking for $2.8 million. We're going to go a full 25% higher than that right from the start, $3.5 million. Submit an offer to Palomares. If he does end up accepting that offer, that would leave us with $2.2 million to potentially spend on other players. And if there's some interesting guys still out there, by the time we hopefully get Palomares signed, I think we could turn this into an extremely interesting and hopefully 5 to 10 years from now, very fruitful crop of some new IAFA talent for our minor league system. Outside of the IAFA period, we're still monitoring what's going on with Canden Risinger. Sean Grattan, our most tenured scout from Wales, reminded us that the reason that Canden Risinger is still available on the market is that he has some quite negative personality traits, and I think that's a good reminder and fair to think about. If over the next month Risinger remains on the market, and if he's willing to talk to us, which he isn't right now, as we can see, he's impossible for us to sign, I'd still consider engaging with him despite that very accurate assessment of Risinger's personality and character from Mr. Grattan. I don't know whether or not that'll happen, so it's possible that this is just a IAFA focused episode, but we will see where the vagaries of OOTP 25 take us. And we've simmed ahead only 5 days, and things worked out with Palomares. Said that he liked our offer, and unless someone offered a better deal, he'd sign with us. And today he just inked that deal for $3.5 million. So think that we have got a gem of a potential prospect in our organization. Looks like a potential 5-tool guy. He can do pretty much everything. The speed is above average, definitely needs to work on the base running and the stealing a bit, but not too much to dislike about Mr. Palomares. And we now have $2.2 million to potentially spend on some other players. And interestingly, Sandoval went for a very low amount to the Dodgers, only $2.1 million. That is interesting to see. Only because that $2.11 million, in theory, we could have tried to fit him in with the $2.2 million we have left. I don't know that it necessarily would have worked, but it certainly would have made for quite a dynamic combination if we had been able to bring in Palomares and Sandoval. But the Dodgers follow our playbook and go after a guy early, and they ended up getting him for pretty cheap compared to what he was looking for. So nicely done by the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I'm going to try to really stretch here with the $2.2 million that we have left. Olalde, Covarrubias, and Berlanga are all available. I don't think we're going to be able to get all 3 of them. I imagine at least 1, possibly 2 of them there's ultimately going to be bidding wars for. But if they're looking at this point for somewhere in the neighborhood of their initial demand, I think we're going to just try to go for a monster class here and see how things go. Berlanga, the reliever, is probably the one that I'm going to be least aggressive on, at least in terms of what he's looking for. He's the one that I will probably regret missing on the least. His price is also the highest. So we're only going to offer him $950,000, still $50,000 more than he's looking for. But we're going to go a little more aggressive on the 2 position players that we really like for the money. Olalde, who's looking for $450,000, and then Covarrubias, who's looking for $420,000. And we've got $1.25 million left. The catcher, Covarrubias, since he's looking for a little less, he says he's only looking for $270,000 right now, which is even less than he had been before. We're still going to try to just blow him out of the water with a much bigger offer than the Astros made him, even though it's just a little more than what he was initially looking for. $450,000 to Covarrubias. And what this will actually do is give us the flexibility where if someone's price goes up a little bit, we might be able to still get them all locked up, all 3 of these guys. I don't think that's going to happen, but if we could get these 3 guys all locked up in addition to Palomares, I think that could be an outstanding IAFA class for us. Valde's the tricky one. He's already looking for more than we thought. Going to need to offer him at least $800,000. And that's all we can offer him at this point. So we'll meet his demand. Ooh. Said we met his demand. Yeah, we can't go higher than that. He's really looking for more than $800,000, or he doesn't want to play with us that badly. So we'll regroup. Alalde may not be in the mix, but there are plenty of fish in the sea, especially at this very early stage of the IAFA period where only 2 players have been signed, and we fortunately are the team that signed one of those 2. And there's some other interesting players out there, but right now don't like any of them as much as we like Berlanga and Covarrubias. And if we just end up with those 2 guys, in addition to Palomares, think it'll still be a pretty interesting class. So at this point, I'm going to hold tight, not put out the last $800,000 that we have available, and see if hopefully we can get these guys wrapped up and locked up with the offers that we've made to them. But if we need to bump them up a little bit, we'll have the cash to do that by not locking it up with somebody else that we don't want to get on the team as energetically. And things have worked out well. We got Covarrubias signed for the $450,000 and Berlanga signed for the $900,000. So still have $800,000 left to spend. And we've signed a guy who I think at the very least could be a really good backup catcher with that personality and outstanding defense. And if the bat comes along, could certainly be in the mix to be a starting catcher for us. Also got Berlanga, who we think could be a pretty interesting arm out of the bullpen. Probably the least interesting of the 3 prospects to me, but it's still young talent. And then, of course, Mr. Palomares, a couple of the other players, the English Scotsman Lee Muggeridge signed with the Tigers organization for almost $2 million. First baseman Alfredo Silva went for $5.7 million. The shortstop Arellano also went for $5.7 million. Center fielder Fidel Trujillo, who we didn't talk about in this episode, but we had looked at the end of the last episode, went for $5.4 million. So like the value that we've gotten, and with $8 million or $800,000 left to spend, still some guys to check in on. We'll check in on Alalde. I'm guessing his price may be even higher, but if, we'll see. I think, was it the Angels that were looking at him? They've still got some money left. I can't even remember whether it was the Angels that he said had made a bid for him or not. Yeah, he's got an offer better than our remaining pool. So we won't get Alalde, but there are a few guys that are interesting to us. The one that intrigued me somewhat when I looked through earlier was the center fielder Tonio Ramirez. The bat looks at best average-ish if he reaches his full potential. But he's a really good bunter with decent speed. Looks like a decent outfield type. He's actually also a type who could play first or third base if we really needed to. And he's got an incredible personality to potentially influence those around him positively, but also potentially maximize the potential we think he has. Also, only average scouting accuracy on him, so there's a chance maybe the bat's a little better than we think, although could certainly be worse than we think. but he's a guy who's not looking for a huge price tag, and we think we could certainly layer into this year's class. Says he's looking for 230. We'll bump it up to 250 and get an offer out to him. And there's probably another player or two that we'll make an offer to shortly. And I think we're going to make an offer to another relief pitcher, closer David Ibata, 17-year-old out of the Dominican. High work ethic. He's durable. We think his stuff could be really good. Movement and control, more average, and the control could certainly be a big issue for him. And he's obviously got a lot of work to do on his stuff. But a 17-year-old getting close to the mid-90s, durable, high loyalty and work ethic. Looking for $410,000. We'll offer him $450,000, which would leave us with just $100,000 left to play with if either of these guys comes back and asks for more money. But with offers now out there to Ibata and Ramirez, got the potential to make this a 4 or 5 person class, which, given that we got the guy we like the most already, could prove to be pretty fruitful for our Oakland A's organization. And Nelson Olalde did end up signing with the New York Mets. Check in on exactly how much he signed for. $1.4 million. So he's a guy who, I believe his initial request was $450,000. So good for him for getting several times more than he was originally looking for. Outside of Palomares, we're going a little more quantity than quality. But we wish Nelson the best of luck with the Mets organization. And we are to the beginning of the preseason. Right now, still have not heard back from the center fielder, Tonio Ramirez. Ibata favors our offer, which is positive. Check in briefly on player development. Haven't done that in several weeks of game time at this point. Taking a look at the development lab, we've got a lot of frustrated guys, as we often do. The main thing is to just avoid players who potentially have disastrous results. Secondary pitch improvement with 3 pretty important pitchers is going well. Weiss and O'Banner on track, and Bobby Garland is excelling. Trey Saldana, one of the top young pitching prospects in our organization, on track with a relatively extensive program to improve his pitch movement. Darnell Selvey excelling in a quality of contact program. Dozer Comunez, another top prospect, on track with his focus on improving his control. Jeremy Scholl and Chase Dora, another couple major leaguers, on track with their secondary pitch improvement. And then Mike Homer, the potential two-way player, and Mike Curtis, both doing well with secondary pitch improvement. Scow Curtis is actually excelling. And Amariel Cinder and Gravedigger Palomares are both excelling with their programs as well. So a lot of guys are excelling here 4 to 5 weeks out. And most importantly, we don't have anyone who's completely struggling and at this point on pace to perhaps have some regression in either their current abilities or their ceilings. So although a lot of frustrated guys out there, we do at this point have 5 programs that are excelling and 7 that are on track. So if we can keep up this type of pace, it's going to be a pretty productive first stint in the development lab before we turn our attention right near the start of spring training to those defense, base running, and occasionally bunting-oriented programs. And Ibata still says he favors our offer. Unfortunately, Tonio Ramirez has come and wants some more money. We've only got $100,000 to play with, and yeah, that's not a number that we can get to right now. I don't think $350,000, which is the max that we can go with him with the other offer that we have outstanding, will get it done, but don't know if we don't ask. Yeah, not going to get it there yet. So we will see what happens with the offer to Mr. Ibata. And if he does sign for the $450,000, we'll still have another $350 left to perhaps pivot to somebody else. And we did get the closer, David Ibata, signed, so a fourth member of our IAFA class of 2037 is on board. And right now, with the $350,000 that we've got left to spend, no one that's really that intriguing to us at the price point. We may end up not spending the money, but I think honestly what I'm going to do is just wait another week or so and see if the market dries up for somebody and they get a little more desperate in terms of the amount that they're willing to accept. Still think we may end up spending that money on somebody, but there's no one that we're all that interested in chasing with it right now. So we're hoping that someone who's looking for a bit more money has a price that comes down when the game of musical chairs that some of these prospects are playing ends and they find themselves left without a seat. And if you're wondering what's going on here in early February with Canden Risinger, signability has gotten to hard on him, so he may be willing to talk with us. Says he's looking for a one-year major league deal at $1.38 million. His current negotiation mood, certainly not great. I can't argue with Sean Gratton that Risinger is kind of a jerk. He's fragile, and that disruptive personality might not be great in our clubhouse. But we've got a pretty strong clubhouse. We're a defending world championship team. And one thing that you can't say about Risinger is that he hasn't been an effective player over the course of his major league career, with a 2.78 ERA and a 6.2 WAR over 229 and 2/3 innings pitched, 156 ERA plus, 72 FIP minus. I think he's also a guy that if we signed him and it didn't work out, we could trade him away. He wants that promised role as a closer. Kamani Banner did a really nice job for us over the second half of last season in that role. And as we talked about earlier, Kamani Banner is also looking well on his way to improving one of his off pitches in the Dev Lab this offseason. But with the stamina that O'Banner has, I think he could potentially slide into that stopper role for us, particularly if we move the youngster Mr. Weiss into the rotation this year, although that's not guaranteed either. But for the price point of Risinger, I'm willing to explore bringing him on board. We're actually going to offer him a little bit more than he was looking for at $1.4 million. Going to promise him the closer role. And we're just going to do it for this one-year deal. Says he's willing to think about it. So we've got an offer out to Canden Risinger to potentially become our closer as we try to repeat here in 2037. We knew, thinking about our financial situation as this offseason began, that with salaries for many players climbing in 2038, either because of deals we've already signed with them or moving up in terms of the arbitration money that they're owed, that one-year deals were going to be about all we could do in free agency. And I think potentially bringing one of the top relief pitchers who was on the market back in November when it opened up on for just $1.4 million here in February on the one-year deal that we can't afford is something that we at least have to explore. Antonio Ramirez, the outfield prospect whose personality we really liked. Ended up signing with Baltimore. He was originally looking for 200, I believe 250 or 280. Ended up signing for 750 with the Orioles. So more money than we were willing and able to pay by the time we really engaged with him. Still haven't found anyone else in the market that we'd really want to spend the $350,000 we have less on, but we're going to continue exploring, and we'll let you know if we do anything. And Canden Risinger is on board. Fan interest increases slightly, but imperceptibly as we remain at 88. And the players were leery of this acquisition, not concerned that he's going to start any fights, but they're upset that his previous reputation will follow him. Hope is that the current solid veteran leadership group in the locker room should be able to keep him from causing any issues. So definitely skeptical of the disruptive Risinger joining our team. Team chemistry happy. We haven't put Risinger on the roster yet, so we're not seeing him there yet because we actually have 40 guys on the 40-man roster. So this will ultimately result in us needing to make another move to open up a spot on the 40-man for the combustible relief pitcher. And there was no real trade market for Rodolfo Quintanilla, the 26-year-old reliever, 8th-round pick from 2028, who has spent a little bit of time with us at the major leagues over the past 3 years, put up a 4.34 ERA over 103 2/3 innings pitched for our A's. Hopefully no one will pick him up. As I said, not much of a trade market. We basically had to pick from 3 or 4 guys in the entire baseball universe who were making $8-10 million a year and were not productive players to get them off the books. So figured it made more sense just to waive and DFA him. But that will open up a spot on the 40-man for Risinger. And he'll be in camp with us. Whether or not he'll make the team, whether or not he'll start some fights in the locker room, whether he'll disrupt the good feelings that we have after having won a World Series last year, are all questions that we'll find out the answers to over the coming episodes. Still nothing that we can really do with the $350,000 that we have left. No one who's all that interesting to me. You can see there's still a lot of pitchers out there, and there's still a lot of batters out there. So we're going to continue to be patient. May end up spending that money on somebody, but right now the prices haven't fallen enough to make it worth our while, in my opinion. And the Twins actually claimed Rodolfo Quintanilla, so he is part of their organization now. They've guaranteed him his minor league deal. Basically was a pretty generic right-handed reliever. He had done fine with us, but we've got plenty of pretty generic right-handed relievers in our organization, and many of them have more than the one option year left that Quintanilla had. So wish Rodolfo the best of luck in the Twins organization, except for when we are playing the Twins this upcoming season. And we finally found a guy willing to accept a somewhat smaller offer in the IAFA pool. That's another reliever, Alfredo Carias. He had said he was looking for $420,000, but we figured we'd try him again with the $350,000 that we have, and he's willing to consider that offer. Carias, a guy who looks like he could be a pretty generic right-handed arm out of the bullpen, but a little more organizational depth if we can bring him on board. And you never know when the random number generator of the talent change randomness will work in your favor. So always interested in bringing on someone who, in a best case scenario, has some decent potential. And we did end up getting Carey assigned as well, so it's going to be a 5-person IAFA class for the Oakland A's this year, highlighted by the, we hope, excellent young infield prospect, Mr. Palomares. And we've made it to the start of spring training, just one day away from finding out how all these development lab investments worked out. Most importantly, we still have nobody that's struggling. Bobby Garland excelling with his secondary pitch improvement. Darnell Selvey continues to excel with his quality of contact program. And Mike Homer, Psycho Alcindor, Scow Curtis, and Gravedigger Palomares are all excelling in their programs as well. So potentially one day away from some, we hope, pretty interesting results in the development lab for this offseason. And as we get spring training underway, we're going to just sim ahead one game here before we finish up this episode to find out the hopefully mostly positive results from the development lab. Kevin Patterson still going to be out for 5 days after that surgery to remove bone chips. He was our starting pitcher in the 4th and final game of the World Series that we ended up winning, although he was not involved in the decision. Hoping he will look similar to what he has always looked like coming back from this injury, but he should basically have a pretty full spring training, so hopefully Fish will be ready to go in the rotation in probably a 4th or 5th spot in the rotation when we do get to the start of the season in about 5 weeks. And we've made it through the 20 long programs. Although spring training began yesterday, we are only playing our first game today. And overall, one of the more successful results have since we started using 20 programs just to learn as much as we can about this relatively new feature of the game. There were no awful programs, which is positive. 8 showed no improvement, which means that we had 12 successful programs overall, so a 60% overall success rate. And importantly, of those 12 successful programs, although 6 were only successful, 6 of them were outstanding. So that's a very positive result to have 30% of our programs with outstanding results. Now, several of those are the secondary pitch improvement program, which has a higher success rate than others, but if I could pretty consistently get 60% of the programs overall being successful and half of those 60% of the programs having outstanding results, based on the experience I've had in the development lab over the first 6 months or so of playing Out of the Park Baseball 25, I'd probably sign up for that more often than not. So before finishing things up, we'll take a quick run through the different programs. The young outfielder Juan Lovato, who we picked up in a trade last year with Atlanta, going to be fighting for a 4th or 5th outfielder spot with us this year. Unfortunately, no improvement in his program to improve his quality of contact. Another guy that he's fighting with, though, for a roster spot, Sergio Palomares, the IAFA outfielder from many years ago who came up last season as a utility outfielder for us. One of our better outfield defenders who can potentially give Jake Ortega a break in center field from time to time. And Palomares, without outstanding result in his quality of contact program, improves his current and potential BABIP ratings both by 5. So it looks like he's kind of reached his full potential at this point in those ratings. Pretty good gap power and a decent eye. Lots of speed. We talked about the interesting glove. Obviously, we'll see what people do in spring training. But Palomares and Lovato in a battle for a spot. Palomares out of option years and Lovato, I believe, is also out of option years. So they're going to be competing for 4th and 5th outfield spots. And based on what happened in the development lab, maybe make Palomares a little bit of a favorite here on February 27th. Mike Curtis, outstanding in his secondary pitch improvement, his potential and current curveball stuff improved by 5. He's a guy who we've really liked since we picked him up in a trade with the Phillies 2.5 years ago. Hasn't necessarily performed the way that we would have wanted on the field, but good to see his curve getting better. Hopefully that'll help his stuff going forward. Amade Alcindor, young prospect, both his potential and current I rating improved with an outstanding result for plate discipline. Alcindor, who made it up to high A ball last year, probably will be in double A this year. Hopefully we'll continue to see some development from the 23-year-old. 4th straight outstanding result that we're going to be talking about from Mike Homer, secondary pitch improvement. Potential and current splitter both improved by 5. Homer, the two-way player who was our second-round draft pick in 2036, so the 19-year-old with an outstanding result. Taking a look at his pitching ratings here, and you can see that made some progress with the splitter that we talked about. Only 19 years old, and his pitches aren't all that far off major league quality. Chuck Huntley, another prospect in our organization. Unfortunately, no improvement in his pitch movement program. Alejandro Landin, this is a good one. Strength and conditioning program, successful. Injury proneness improves from fragile to somewhat fragile. Still shows up at fragile for what we see, but the young second baseman who's hit 35 and 37 home runs for us with average WAR of about 5 in his first couple seasons, hopefully can be a little more durable and be in the lineup even more often for us going forward. The veteran Jake Ortega, no improvement in his gap power program, unfortunately. Chase Dora, successful with secondary pitch improvement, worked on his sinker. This is the pitcher that we picked up in that big Brady Harris trade. His sinker now looks as good as his cutter or his changeup. So the hope is that he will be a very important part of our rotation for the next several years. Jeremy Scholl, potential and current cutter, both improved. Successful result in that program for the reliever. Been our closer at times over the years, with the addition of Canden Risinger and the emergence of Kamanio Banner. Scholl may be more of a setup guy going forward, but still nice to see him make some progress. Luis Godina, 20-year-old prospect, no improvement in contact. Ernesto Camunez improves control. Current control rating improves by 5. Always nice to see an 18-year-old number 42 prospect in baseball. Our IAFA signing from just over 2 years ago makes some pretty significant progress. And you can see for an 18-year-old, although he'll be 19 in just a couple weeks, his ratings aren't far off major league quality. He was in the DSL with us a year ago. Looks like he would absolutely dominate that level. Looks like he can probably handle Class A ball. So Camunez looks like he may be a prodigy in terms of his ability to be maybe making the major leagues in his early 20s. Darnell Selvey, former first-round pick, potential and current BABIP rating both improved by a little less than 5. Outstanding result for the 20-year-old in his contact program. Jesus Saldana increased his pitch movement. Current movement improved by 10. So that is a fantastic result for us, given that you may remember we signed Saldana, who's pitched only 21 games above AA over the course of his career, to a 10-year, $70 million extension at the beginning of this offseason. We liked what we saw from him in AAA. We liked what we saw with the IAFA signing from 5 years ago in terms of his development, and to get an outstanding result for his pitch movement just months after or a successful result for his pitch movement. I say outstanding because the rating improved by 10 is a pretty positive result for us, given that we just signed him to a long-term contract. Jorge Orellana, prospect in the organization, not successful with bat speed. Juan Ramos, 26-year-old first baseman, led the league in ribbies last year. His plate discipline program had no improvement. Camanio Banner, potential changeup and current changeup stuff, both improved. So nice to see from the guy who could end up in a stopper role for us this year. Bobby Garland, an outstanding result on secondary pitch improvement, potential and current changeup, both improved by 10. Garland, outstanding changeup among his 4-pitch arsenal. The only thing we can complain about with Garland is walking batters and the lack of control, but he has been pretty effective at the major league level despite a lot of walks. 122 walks in 235 at-bats, but just a 200 batting average against him, mid-threes ERA, and a 3 WAR for him over his first 2 seasons in the majors. Certainly a guy who could compete for a spot in the rotation, but with the likes of Mr. Saldana now signed and Doug Weiss around, maybe a stretch for Garland to be back in the rotation. Unfortunately, 2 of our key young players, Doug Weiss and Arturo Uresti, no improvement in their programs. Doug Weiss on that relatively easy secondary pitch improvement, no improvement unfortunately. And Arturo Uresti tried to generate more bat speed there, no improvement there. But fortunately for all of these guys who were not successful, no noticeable negative changes for any of them either. So when all was said and done, I think it's a relatively successful result for the development lab. And we'll now start focusing on trying to improve the defense of some of these players over the shorter programs that we can run between now and the end of spring training. And with that, we'll call it an episode. If you've got thoughts on what we did in the IAFA period, whether or not we should have signed Canden Risinger, and what you think of what happened in the development lab, or any other topics that you'd like to talk about, I always love to hear the comments in the comment section and get some feedback and input on what we're doing. Next time around, we're going to play through spring training, find out the results from the second trip to the development lab, and most importantly, figure out the 26 players who are going to be coming north from Arizona to Oakland as we try to go back-to-back, winning a second straight world championship here in 2037. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.